So as I've mentioned many times before in these videos, I have encountered a lot of bitterness, anger, and resentment from Christians for quoting Romans 11 verse 26. It's amazing. It is amazing that Christians would reject passages that they claim to embrace. They say, well, we reject the Old Testament. That's not for us anymore. It's the New Testament now. Not even knowing that it's covenant, not testament. So I'll go over very carefully what many Christians have shown to their resentment to me, the thing that caused this resentment, the words that brought out their resentment. Verse 25, for I would not, brethren, talking to the Romans, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you be wise in your own conceits, that partial blindness, part blindness, has happened to Israel until the time of the Gentiles comes to an end. And I have explained that the wording here is, if you compare it to in Matthew 24, Luke 21, you'll notice, I believe it's in Luke 21, it says the time of the Gentiles comes to an end there. And then he says, and so all Israel shall be saved. And that flies, like I said, that flies in the face of Christian doctrine. They believe that you must believe before you are saved. Well, that may apply to Gentiles, but that does not necessarily apply to the Jews. Why? I'll get to that in a minute. Because it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and will turn away unholiness, impiety from Jacob, because this is my covenant unto them when I shall take away their sins. Where did Paul get that from? He says, because it is written. It is written. Written where? In the Old Testament. As you Christians say, and you so despise the words of Jehovah and the prophets. Isaiah 59. It's written right here. The redeeming kinsman. Not Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is not related to Israel. Yehoshua, the Moshiach, however, is related by blood to Israel. Shall come to Zion. Now, the way King James Version wrote this, it made it look like it says, and unto them that turn from transgression in Jacob. But if you notice, Paul said this, and so all Israel shall be saved, because it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, redeeming kinsman, remember? That will turn away unholiness, impiety from Jacob. Was Paul disagreeing with the way that the prophet wrote it? No, he was not. King James Version was disagreeing with it. Let me show you something. The redeeming kinsman, or as Paul would say, the deliverer. will come to Zion. Zion is Jerusalem. And turn transgression from Jacob. Paul said it exactly as it says in Hebrew. King James Version does not. Because you see, you Gentiles, you don't believe Israel can be saved first, and then they believe. But Paul told you that your narrative is false. Now, yesterday I partially went into the predestined, preordained, and I need to look into it here right now because I didn't go all the way into it. Hold on. Predestined. Foreknew and foreknew. I may have to go with foreknew. And somewhere in here, there it is. See, I missed this. I missed this yesterday. I wanted to go over this very, very carefully. Now, so Paul says in Romans 11 verse 2, speaking of Israel, Jehovah did not reject his people whom he foreknew. Romans 8:29 says, for Jehovah foreknew those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. So when you read Romans 11, Strong's Concordance, has Jehovah cast away his people? And he says here in verse 2, Jehovah has not, cast away his people whom he foreknew. He's talking about Israel. Now, let's go to Romans 8 then. Where I may have to, right here. For whom did he foreknow? Do you know the answer? Israel. That means for Israel, whom he foreknew, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn of many brethren. Moreover, whom he did predestinate, them he also called. And he whom he called, he also justified, and whom he justified, he also glorified. You see, the only way this can happen to a Gentile is if a Gentile is grafted in among the branches of Israel. He says, if the first fruit, that's the Moshiach, is holy, then so is the lump also holy. The lump is Israel. And if the root is holy, then so are all 12 branches. Now, if some of the branches were broken off temporarily, because it says right here it's temporarily, right in here, right here it's temporary. If some of the branches are broken off and you being a wild olive tree were being grafted in among them and partaking jointly with them, partaking jointly. Now, what does partaking jointly mean? It means a co-partner with the 12 tribes of Israel. Ecclesia did not act as co-partner. The Roman Christians did not act as co-partner. Show me one denomination of Christian that acted as co-partner. There were a few among the Anabaptists that tried in the 1600s, and they got close. Only a few. And they were hunted down and killed. They were hunted down and killed so that they would never reach the whole truth. Partaking jointly, co-partner. There is no Christian denomination that says they will inherit co-partnership in the kingdom with Israel. There's none. Show me one. I dare you. Jointly with the fatness of the olive tree, do not boast against the branches. Well, you did so much worse than boast against the branches. So much worse. Because if you boast, you do not bear the root, but the root bears you. You will say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off. Until when? Until the time of the Gentiles comes to an end. We'll read it again and again and again until either the day I die or until Shiloh comes. And you stand by faith. Do not be high-minded, but fear. There was no fear. There was no fear of retribution among the Christians when they went and slaughtered the Jews. When they burned them alive in their synagogues during the pogroms, when they burned them alive in their synagogues during the Reformation, when they burned them alive in the Holocaust, there was no fear of retribution. Now, if Jehovah did not spare the natural branches who didn't believe, what do you think is going to happen to you? Look at the goodness and severity of Jehovah on them which fell severity, but toward you goodness, if you continue in this goodness. Well, it's been prophesied that you won't continue in this goodness. He says, otherwise you also shall be cut off, and they also, not if they abide not. So all you have to do is go and look at this, and so all Israel shall be saved. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away unholiness from Jacob. So we don't have to sit here and try to say, well, wait a minute, he qualifies. No, there's no qualification here, folks. This is Israel. They are no longer going to be abide in unbelief. They will be grafted in, for Jehovah is able to graft them in again. And if you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and you were grafted in contrary to nature, how into the good olive tree, how much better chance do these branches, these 12 branches of Israel, have being grafted back into their own olive tree? And let's not forget this verse. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, in verse 15, what shall the receiving of them be again but life from the dead? Well, they're guaranteed resurrection from from death to life. Right here. Because you see, the first fruit is holy. And that's the reason why the lump is holy. You cannot have the one without the other. Now, going back then to Isaiah 59, there are some things in this chapter that can be easily missed. So I will start at the top. And Yehoshua tells Isaiah, or Yeshayahu is how you say his name, look, Jehovah's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, neither is his ear heavy that it cannot hear. But your iniquities have separated between you and your Elohim, and your sins have hid his face from you, that he will not hear you. Why? Why? Well, back in those days, their hands were defiled with blood, and your fingers with iniquity, and your lips have spoken lies, and your tongue has muttered perverseness. Well, that's exactly what the Christians have done today. In fact, that's exactly what the Christians have done since the Nicene Creed. And I'm being generous here. None calls for justice, none pleads for the truth. Same as today. Same was after the Nicene Creed. They trust in vanity, they speak lies, they conceive mischief, and bring forth iniquity. Do you think that if the Jews, Israel, were going to suffer because of this, that the Gentiles somehow would not? Take a look around you and ask yourself the question. They hatch cockatrices' eggs, like they hatch COVID. How about that? Like they hatch diseases like the Marburg virus. Have you ever heard of that? Better find out about it. Better find out what works against it. But that's in another video. And weave the spider's web. He that eats of their egg, they die. And that which is crushed breaks out into a viper, comes out something worse. Gain of function research. Yeah, that is what this is describing. Back in those days, it was something much smaller than that. But now, when the time of the Gentiles is still here, this is describing gain of function research. Go Google it. Just go Google gain of function research and look at this carefully. For he that eats of their egg dies, and that which is crushed breaks out into a viper. Webs are their apparel, and they cover it, and their works are works of iniquity, and acts of violence is in their hands. We're about to see evidence of that very shortly, folks. Their feet run to evil and make haste to shed innocent blood. Oh my, however, that is true today, just like it was in the days of ancient Jerusalem. Their thoughts and their iniquity, wasting and destruction, are in their paths. The way to peace they know not, and there is no justice in their goings, and they make them crooked paths. Whosoever go in there shall never know peace. Their judgment is far. Therefore, judgment is far, and justice does not overtake us. We wait for light, but all we get is obscurity. For brightness we walk in darkness. We grope for the wall like the blind. We grope as if we had no eyes. We stumble at noonday as in the night. We are in desolate places like dead men. So as it was in the days of ancient Jerusalem, so it is today among Gentile Christianity. There's no difference. We roar all like bears and soar like doves. We look for justice, but there is none. There is no salvation. It is far from us. There is no Yeshua. Yeshua. That is the latter half of the name of the Moshiach. His name is Yehoshua. Is far from us. Our transgressions are multiplied, and our sins testify against us. And they did. Which is why the branches, or some of the branches, were broken off. Rebellion, transgressing, and lying against Jehovah. How do they do that? Using the name word God instead of Jehovah. Using the name Jesus instead of Yehoshua. And departing from Elohim, not God, Elohim. See that? See that word? That's not God, it's Elohim. That's exactly how you departed from him, by superimposing your word God on him. When I showed you and proved to you that the name God is the name of the Druidic Zeus. An idol. Speaking extortion and revolt. Conceiving and uttering from the heart the words of falsehood. Judgment is backwards, and justice is far off, because truth falls in the street. There is no truth in the street. Back then, that was exactly the way it was. Today, a man can claim that he's a woman and try to force other people to agree with him, to say it. And equity is not allowed. Truth fails. And anyone that removes himself or departs from evil makes himself a prey. Well, isn't that the way it is now? In Christian, enlightened society that we have today. Jehovah saw it, and it caused him to tremble with displeasure. Trembling with displeasure, to be grieved, to be broken up. And it displeased him that there was no judgment. He saw that there was no man and wondered that there was no intercessor. Therefore, his own arm brought Yashah, deliverance unto him, and righteousness supported him. For he put on righteousness as a breastplate. Where do you think Paul got his words about putting on righteousness as a breastplate? And a helmet of salvation. Where do you think? Where do you think Paul got the term helmet of salvation from? That's Yeshua, helmet of salvation upon his head. And he put on the garments of vengeance for clothing, and was clad with zeal and jealousy as a cloak. Now, watch this. Watch carefully or you'll miss it. According to their deeds, accordingly he will repay, fury to his adversaries, recompense to his enemies. What enemies? You ready? Are you ready to find out who his enemies are? Are you sure? The coastlands. The coastlands of what? The Mediterranean Sea. Will he repay, recompense? That's Rome. Behold the coastlands of the Mediterranean Sea. Right here. This is it. Vengeance against them. Take a look. Look carefully. You see, folks, the Mediterranean Sea does not exclude the Black Sea. Vengeance upon all of these people. Watch this. To the coastlands of the Mediterranean Sea will he repay, recompense. Now, they will be fear the name of Jehovah from the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of Jehovah, it says, will lift up his standard against him. All right. Let's dig deeper. Nus says to flee, to escape, driving, escape, or put to flight. Now we know what this means. So, it says, the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of Jehovah, or the breath, the word that speaks out of his mouth, or the great big shout of this trumpet sound of Jehovah, shall cause them to run for their lives. Once again, shall put them to flight, make them run away. Okay? Now, there is another scripture where it uses that term, come in as a flood. See if I can find it this way. Daniel 9. Come in as a flood. And the end, at the very time of the end, shall be with a flood. All right. So, we know this is about the Roman Empire. We know this is about the Roman Empire because it was the Romans, after all, who destroyed Jerusalem and the temple. Vespasian and Titus did it. The Romans. That's why we can look at the Roman Empire and know that he's talking about the coastlands when he says the coastlands. The Roman Empire. They're going to come in as a flood, and they're going to be sent running for their lives. There shall be many dead. Many dead. So when you read, this is what I'm saying now. I'm going to harp on this more and more and more. When you read about the Gog and Magog war, Ezekiel 39. Actually, hold on. Ezekiel 38 and 39. As I said before, this includes Gomer, Gomer essentially, other than Tarshish, covers all of Europe. That's right. Ashkenaz, Riphath, and let's see, the sons of Gomer, I gotta look it up again. Okay, Ashkenaz, those are all the Germanic tribes, including the Anglo-Saxons. And don't make me get an argument with you about that, claiming that the Saxons are the sons of Isaac. They stole that name. The Germanic tribes did. The people of Israel are scattered into all the nations, as it is written. Riphath would be the Gauls and the Celts. House of Togarmah are among Yavan, the Greeks, Armenia, Turkey, etc. So essentially, the Gomerites are the Romans. So we look here. They're all going to come, including Persia, Cush. See, we got all the bases covered here. You got all these lands are going to come too. Joel 3 talks about Egypt. It's the same war. It appears to be after Lebanon is, if you read Joel 3, and what was the other one? Oh, Zechariah 9. How Tyre and Zidon are going to be dispossessed in the latter days. And Joel 3 talks about it, that same thing, the same event. But Joel 3 goes in hard, goes in deep, says they're not only going to be dispossessed, but they're going to be sold by the Jews to a people afar off, the Sabians. And that is going to bring the whole world, all of Rome, all of this, including Justinian Rome, the Byzantines, aka the Greek Orthodox, the Russians. How dare they do that? Well, the Jews today in Israel, they don't have the guts to do something like that. That's going to require Yehoshua the Moshiach to dispossess Lebanon. He's going to send a fire on right here. Send the fire on Magog and Gomer. Gomer being those who dwell carelessly in the coastlands of the Mediterranean Sea. And of course, not only them, the others who dwell carelessly in the coastlands of the Mediterranean Sea, Libya, Libya. Be North Africa. And they're going to try to come in like a flood. When the Messiah, when the Moshiach is there, they're going to come in and try to, they're going to try to do something about it. Thinking he's the Antichrist. Well, he is. He is the Antichrist. Because the Christ you Christians claim as your champion is the Philistine Goliath compared to David, Ben David of Israel, the real Mashiach. Now you know that everything that Paul spoke about was written in the prophets. So every time you say that the New Testament or the Old Testament doesn't matter anymore and you reject that, you are essentially rejecting all the words of Jehovah, and you are rejecting the words of Paul, you're rejecting the words of Yehoshua, you are rejecting all the words of the disciples, which is why you are blind, which is why your justice is perverse, and why you allow and enforce the idea that men can be women today.